Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk about the process and where we are now, and I'm going to do that based on my personal reflections of being in some of the recent HTA parallel advice meetings. This is just some of the meetings that I've been in that have been attended by a variety of different agencies. As I say, varying between probably 2 to 5 agencies in any one meeting. There's a lot more of these being requested. We have 2 more that we're doing just this week. So I think this is something that's really going to increase a lot. So what's worked well about these meetings? I think because of the existing machinery, if you like, of the EMA, it's made it relatively easy for the HTA agents to join in with that, because that process is already established for EMA scientific advice and the companies are familiar with that. It's a really valuable opportunity to hear the views and reasoning of regulators and other HTA agencies. It's the only format in which we can really do that. And I think, although I've been surprised more by the similarities in our positions, there are times when it does expose the differences and you really understand some of the constraints and the difficulties that companies may face. But I think by bringing everyone together in the same room, you definitely have the possibility to give more helpful advice as a consequence of understanding all these different viewpoints. So there's often a way around things if you think about them early, and I think that is what these early advice opportunities offer. So areas for improvement. We obviously need a process that supports the delivery of high quality advice. From a personal perspective, within the process that we've been using at the moment, I sometimes find that difficult to accommodate proposals that change as they get modified by feedback from EMA or other HTA agencies, and sometimes what's proposed at the meeting is slightly different from what I read at the beginning. Whether you have the expertise that you would like to bring to that meeting. When we do our national scientific advice, I would always, in my NICE process, have 3 experts in the room with me. It's obviously different, and not everybody could bring all the experts that they needed. So you need to find a way to engage with them in the right way to make sure that you're actually giving good quality advice. And by virtue of the fact that there are more people in the room, there is a trade-off with that. And sometimes there's what feels like quite a limited opportunity to explore any issues within the company. And everything can't always be in a briefing book, not all the thinking that perhaps went into options that the company decided to do or not to do. And I think having space for some interactive discussion is really valuable in terms of being able to formulate better, more helpful advice. So at the moment, very much, we act as individual agencies and all produce outputs in the format that we usually give them, or through the EMAs, the standard advice will go to the EMA, will go to the company, but there isn't a formal mechanism for HTA agencies to actually see that advice at any point in writing before it does go to the company. So if I'm lucky, I might get that at the end, and it's interesting to see what has been written down compared to what I've heard in the meeting. So an important thing that I think inviting an HTA agency to a meeting, it changes the nature of that meeting. It's no longer exactly the same regulatory EMA interaction that happened in the past. And I think within companies as well, that it's important that the regulatory and the health outcomes teams interact and work together to ensure that they're actually maximizing the benefit from having all these different people in the room. And I would say that at times, some of the questions that get asked to the HTA agencies are not always ones that seem to be the most useful. And I think that's something that will grow with time. And it's about interaction between all of us about how to get the most value out of those meetings. And certainly the process has to accommodate the needs of all the different people participating within that process. And it's therefore complicated. It's not a simple thing just to add in more representatives into such meetings. So when thinking about this meeting, there's fundamental questions here. Who should be giving advice? When should it be given? Where should it be given? What is the nature of that advice? How is it? Is it binding advice? Are individual agencies giving those advice? At the moment, we could make some stab at answering those questions, but these are fundamental things that, if we're to move to a more European advice, need to be thought about at a really senior level. This is about what is the policy. Each agency needs to agree a policy on how these things happen. What is the nature of the advice that's produced? It's not something that I, as an individual, can decide for NICE. It's something that would need to be agreed with the senior management team and our board about how we give advice. And once you have an agreed policy decision on these fundamental questions, then out of this comes the process. How does that process need to accommodate those policy objectives? And so the two are both very important steps along the way. And I think possibly policy is perhaps the hardest one, in that each agency involved has their own policy positions on all these things. And the heads of our agencies have to feel comfortable with the process that we're using that produces advice in their name and the status of that advice that is produced. And so some mechanism needs to be found for engaging with the heads of those agencies to ensure that these policy matters are discussed at the highest level, and it's then decided on the way forward, and out of that will then flow the process. I mentioned the process as if it's simple, but it requires the highest levels of rigor in putting together that process. I think HTA agencies have to think about it as you're entering into a contract with companies. And what does that entail? What are the responsibilities, the requirements of that? And so a program plan is completely essential to ensure that everyone is able to participate. And what it takes is dedicated resources to do this properly on a sustainable way. It's extremely difficult to scale up from where I think we are now around the proof of concept to something which is sustainable, that everybody can engage, that the companies know what to expect, and know that when they request advice, they will be able to get it as they were expecting. So in conclusion then, I think we've got lots of useful experience. It's been amazingly rapid how we have gone from not having a parallel advice to many of these meetings happening at the moment. But I think if you take the parallel with clinical development, we're still quite in the early stages in working together towards something which you could describe more as European advice. And what we need are the policy decisions that are needed to support the delivery of a high-quality advice process. And really importantly, we need to be able to find out how to get dedicated resources in a sustainable way to take this forward. Thank you.